This is the Raiders on the Record podcast. Today, we feature Coach Peter Schultz. Coach Peter Schultz is a 2011 Raider graduate. During his time at Hastings High School, he was a three-sport athlete competing in football, basketball, and track and field. In football, he was a 2-year varsity letter winner and 2-time captain of the football team. In basketball and track, he was a multiple-time varsity letter winner as well. After college, Peter realized that teaching was a right fit for him. Luckily, he landed a teaching job in Hastings after already coaching football for a couple seasons. Coach Schultz gives an in-depth interview where he highlights adversity he faced in high school, how he looks at practice every day, and gives a tremendous definition of what success looks like in his life in teaching and coaching. All right, here we are with Coach Peter Schultz. Pete, we always like to start at the beginning of someone's life, and I always like starting out now with your parents. So let's begin with your parents. A couple different questions about them too. Let's hear about their names, where they grew up, their occupation, things of that nature. So once again, let's hear about your parents growing up.
Sure, yeah. So my mom's name is Lori. She is from Crookston, Minnesota, which is way up by Grand Forks, North Dakota. Like kind of like sugar beet farming and very flat land. It's up there. Yes, and they met actually up in Crookston. My dad was looking for like Lutheran school, elementary Lutheran school teaching jobs. She was an elementary school teacher, and they met up there. My dad's name, Jim or James. He is from Merrill, Wisconsin, it would be north central Wisconsin, near Wausau. Some folks know where Wausau is. That's a little bit more well-known city in Wisconsin. They're approaching 60 years old. They've been in Hastings, I think, since about like the late 80s. They left Crookston in like maybe the 88, 89 or so and made their way to Hastings, my mom was actually looking for work as a dental assistant. Tim, I don't need to explain that with your wife and my mom, ironically, worked together. So my mom was looking for dental work and my dad he was still looking for elementary teaching job. And he actually ended up detasseling corn and then working also for an aluminum recycler or their aluminum smelter. I guess that would be south of town. Yeah, whatever. And basically Rosemount Spectra Alloys. Yeah, so they ended up in Hastings, late 80s or so. And they've been, my dad kind of bounced around through a couple of jobs. And my mom has basically done dental work her entire life. And now she's working in town here still, doesn't have the instruments in her hands anymore, but still helping people with their dental health. Really enjoys doing that. She's a chatty cat like I am and really enjoys interacting with people out in the community. And I've always joked that she's not the rumor mill, the gossip, but she definitely always has her pulse on just what's happening in the community. So that's always kind of a fun perspective in our family. And then my dad, similarly to me, also is pretty chatty and also just likes to be present and plugged in as well. And definitely a lot of my personality and values, I guess, for surely would come from them. So very impactful on me in my life. And my two siblings, I have an older brother who is 2.5 years older than I am. Also, both siblings were alumni of Hastings High School. And then my sister is about 9 years older than me. She's a little bit older than I am. But both graduated Hastings High School. And I guess when I look retrospectively at all three of our high school experiences, we all three had different experiences, all good and bad included in all three. And I think a little bit of it, like this might be a small testament to my parents, just being able to provide and support in the unique ways that we all needed. So hats off to them for helping all three of us get through in our own unique ways. And yeah, it's the short end of the long end of my little family history there.
I love it. So Pete, you are a teacher and coach in town. Cool thing about you, you're also an alumni. So I always like hearing about the schools people attended here in town. You don't have to go over every single teacher you had from K through 12, but if there's any teachers at certain levels that really stuck out, had a big impact on you, especially you now, once again, becoming a teacher, maybe molded you and helped you grow or think that you could be a teacher. Let's hear about those people in your life.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'll shout out McAuliffe Elementary for at least me and my brother, my sister attended Pinecrest. No, she had a good experience there, but it was a great experience. I was fortunate enough to live, I think it was maybe about a mile or a little under a mile away. So I vividly remember like riding my bike with some friends to school, kind of like a sunny, picturesque kind of memory in my memory backlog there. But um, I would for surely like to mention Miss Rogie. She was my fourth grade teacher. And I think what I most remember about Miss Rogie, and maybe she would be considered a little bit more old school, but definitely a teacher that challenged me, but also would help to identify my strengths and all students' strengths, or at least I remember that about Miss Rogie, of like a kind of a hard nose, but also very much would shine a light on people's strengths. So I always thought that was nice. And I'm pretty sure she still works out at Bellwood Oaks. So if anybody sees Miss Rogie out there, give her a thumbs up and tell her she's awesome. And then actually there was if I remember correctly, there was a kind of like a language assistant / maybe like a paraprofessional. Her name was Patty Perez. I'm pretty certain that Patty is still working in the district. Patty was just very kind and welcoming and such a warm presence to have in class. I don't ever recall being like uncomfortable in class just as a student or anything. I can navigate socially, or I've been able to do that for a while now. Not saying I like owned the room. It's more just, I was fortunate enough not to like struggle too much with my kind of adolescent years or whatever. But Patty was also always just like such a good presence to have in class, just a good glue for kids to, and just to remember to be kind to each other and lean on some of those negative tendencies that kids lean on sometimes. So Patty Perez, would love to shout out Patty because very kind and great presence. And I'm pretty sure I saw Patty a few different years throughout my experience or my time, at McCullough. And then moved up to HMS or at Hastings Middle School. And there's for surely probably a half dozen to a dozen teachers I'd love to mention, but if I could think of a few here, Miss Keneally, who I'm pretty sure is either retired or recently retired or just finishing up. In hindsight, I always think of Miss Keneally as like the Oppold of the middle school, very high energy, knowledgeable, resourceful, definitely created an environment in class that was interactive and made learning fun. That was a good introduction to new learning. I always liked Mr. Hansen. Mr. Hansen is a social studies teacher who's still teaching at the middle school. Really fortunate to kind of develop a relationship with him. He and I have stayed in touch throughout the years since I was a student of his, and one of his daughters and I were the same age. And I don't know if he meant to do this intentionally, but he moved up to the high school with me with our grade of the grade I was in after we left the middle school. So I ended up having Mr. Hansen for, I think, 3 or 4 straight school years, which maybe fortunately for me, unfortunately for him, he had to deal with all of the energy I was exhibiting probably, but very kind in person and just somebody who exhibited behavior that like shows I care about you as a human being. And that's awesome. That was really cool. Mr. McGinnis for sure would be another one. Interacted with him as a player for his basketball team, and as a student in his gym and health classes. Mad Dog, I always call him. I forgot even where that nickname came from. Ironically, I'm coaching his son now and I call him Mad Dog too, but always loved interacting with Mr. McGinnis. Such a nice person, such a kind guy. And for sure being an athlete or maybe not an athlete, but being somebody who thinks of himself as an athlete was always fun in his class. There's just a few, and there are a ton more. Mr. Peepo is somebody that really, really always appreciated. He was somebody that kind of maybe affirmed my like love for not classic music, like classic rock, that other teachers didn't, but he and I went a deep dive into, Pink Floyd or Led Zeppelin, talk about it. And, he didn't have a ton of friends that would want to talk about live shows, and which is fine. Right? That's okay. So it was really great that people would be open to that. Yeah. There's a few from the middle school. There's a ton more I could think of. I don't want to think of the whole time, but
no worries.
Yeah.
That's great. I really want to focus on your coaching and your teaching as well, but let's talk about your high school playing days. If you want to give a lot of the highlights from your playing days, let's hear about the sports you played and anything that goes along with those sports too. If your teams did really good some years, there was different highlights from some years. If there's anything specifically that stuck out with you, all conference, all state, captain, things of that nature, especially with teams as well. Let's hear about all those things from your playing days at Hastings High School.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I was a three-sport athlete at Hastings High School. I played football, basketball, and then I threw shot put, discus, and track, and would occasionally bring a football to practice for track, which Coach Cook always appreciated, I think. A couple of highlights I would think from at least the varsity days, or some of the kind of the varsity years of my 11th and 12th grade years. Fortunate enough to go to the section championship game my junior year for basketball with Coach Bikema, who still coached the boys team here at the high school. Really fun experience. Maybe one of the most competitive environments I've ever sat in or been a part of. I wasn't playing per se, but absolutely practicing. And some of those starters, some of those seniors, we had a couple of 1,000-point scorers, really fun, good basketball players, a lot of fun memories, those guys. Interesting when I when I think back on our basketball kind of years, the grade above me and the grade below me had a good amount of talent, just objectively, if we look at them, ton of talent. And then I guess our grade didn't necessarily have a lot of high-end talent. No slouch or any negatives to our guys, Stevens or Hamilton. We just didn't have much size or much kind of top-end talent. But we found ourselves pinched in between there. And what we did have, though, was a pretty strong bond. There was about 7 of us that were close, that were just tight. We were actually friends off the basketball court, and we would have been friends had we not played basketball. And I think that definitely helped to propel the team and push them a little bit forward. I remember that basketball team my junior year for surely taught me about practice and like the proper way to practice, in the sense of you want to have like high pressure situations where you want to have, I guess, a winner or a loser per se, or you want to make it feel like a game-like situation. So once we do get in that actual situation, our blood isn't boiling, our heart rate is not jumping, and we're going to execute. I remember Coach Bikema, we had this drill 6-on-4, obviously gives in 6 defenders, 4 on offense. And so obviously there is an advantage for the 6 guys on defense, but Bikema acknowledged, like, yeah, I realize, you guys have a 2-man advantage, but still I want you to apply the pressure as if you're going 4-on-4. So it was a really fun team to play for. It was a ton of fun to go down to the Civic Center in Rochester. Unfortunately, we lost to Owatonna, I think by 5 points. I got into not an argument, but a kind of a short discussion with Coach Bikema and Coach Schultz about this. I thought we had lost only by 4. I think it was 5. So I think it was 5, but pretty strong memories from that. And yeah, hold on to that, because that was maybe one of the more successful teams as far as win-loss goes that I'd been on. So really fond memories, and I hold on to that dearly. As far as football goes, in varsity, between two years of varsity, junior and senior year, we had won 4 games. So a little bit tougher situation win-loss wise, but it certainly did not affect our kind of resolve or brotherhood. We had, just very similar to our basketball team, we had pretty strong bonds that were formed like in the weight room and hanging out and tubing down the Welch or Cannon River and Welch, and throwing routes at Pioneer Park, kind of doing extra lifting after school. Brandon Anderson, Derek Bain, Matt Anderson, Tony Hammis. There's a ton of guys that live pretty, I guess, strongly in my brain and my memory. When I think back on those 2 years of football, definitely some challenging teams that we had to face, but a ton of brotherhood and a ton of resolve together. For surely look back on those years fondly, or on those seasons fondly, that because of that kind of hard work, that collective effort that we put in together, and we felt okay. We felt satisfied with the results based off of the effort that we put in, based off of the execution that we did and the hard work that we put in the off season. So we may not have won many games, and that's okay, but we were like pretty, not to sound like wordy or anything, we were pretty damn proud just with the results. And there are some kind of some horror stories that, not horror stories, but some kind of memorable stories in a not so positive way about walking onto the field against some of the teams we were playing against. And the coaches, if you ask any of those, some of the current varsity coaches, I think they would say the same thing, is that we were still finding ways to have fun. We were still finding ways to fight and put our best foot forward, even if the scoreboard didn't necessarily reflect that. Yeah. Yeah. And then one memory that sticks out, which always just was a really strong learning time moment for me. And it wasn't a moment, it was like a 6-month period. So my sophomore year football season, the varsity team needed a center, and at the time I'd been playing tight end. I could play anything on the line, where I enjoyed playing offensive line. And the varsity team called me up to play center, which I'd never done before. So I was kind of freaking out. Our next opponent was actually Cretin-Durham Hall. And at the time, Cretin was a 6A, Hastings was also 6A. Or I'm pretty sure I don't know if 6A had been created at that point, but Cretin was a powerhouse, so to speak. They won state in 2009, I'm pretty sure. They had 2 NFL football players, Michael Floyd and Chantrell Henderson, other names, and then a couple of other Division I players. So they just had some talent. Charlie Weiss from Notre Dame was coming to Cretin-Durham Hall football games and basketball games. And Pete Carroll was supposedly hanging around too as well, the USC football coach. So there was like a lot of kind of media hype and excitement around that team. And that was like our next opponent. So I vividly remember watching defensive film. I remember watching offensive film. I think it was Mr. Cook's room at the time as a 10th grader. And we're watching Chantrell Henderson, he was the number 1 high school recruit, I think in 2009. He went to USC, and then he went to Miami. He played for the Texans and the Bills. Yeah. So I was watching him pancake kids on both offense and defense. And keep in mind, I have to play center. I have to snap the football, and then I have to block, which may seem simple at first thought, but then you look up and you're 6'7", 315, and pretty good athlete. And you're watching him on film, steamroll kids. So yeah. Anyway, so we get to Tuesday practice, and we were in some 11-on-11 setting, and I tweaked my foot. And the following day, I just powered through it. I was like, I'll be fine, whatever. You manage your injuries, or you manage your pain. And then Wednesday had come around, and it had not gotten better. And when Thursday had come around, and I couldn't walk. And then, so at that point, I think they had already found another solution, another option for center. I broke my foot. I broke my foot it was either probably Tuesday or Wednesday. And I don't know if psychologically me knowing that I was about to go up against Chantrell Henderson had to do with any of that, but I don't know. So I broke my foot. It was like my first little taste of adversity, right? Like Coach Drain and Coach Russ Welch at the time, and some of those 9th grade coaches had thrown this word around adversity. And it was like, I know what you're saying. I can give you the definition. I don't know what that is, right? I'm a 10th grader. I get pulled up to varsity to play center. I'm pretty excited. And then I break my foot. So I have this big peak moment, and then I break my foot. I find out, I think maybe 6 weeks later, I have to get surgery. It's going to be like a 3-month-long recovery process. My dad and sister, and this is my sophomore year. My dad and sister at the time were active members of the Hastings National Guard. They were actually deployed, I think maybe at the beginning of September that year, or maybe they had already been deployed at the time. So I think there were a few just like challenges being thrown at me. Injury with sports, that's tough. Sports is a huge outlet for me to kind of get your mind off of school. And 2 of my immediate family members, my dad and my sister, are like halfway across the globe. And my mom, brother, and me are living in the house. And we're rock solid, but at the same time, you can't deny the fact that just things are not normal. So it was just my first taste of that. And it was tangible adversity. So I had foot surgery, and then rehab, did a little bit of PT, and was able to play kind of that back half of the basketball season for my sophomore year, which was wonderful and great. Like I was just happy to be playing basketball again. I love playing football, but basketball is more of a sport that I got like just joy from. So I was happy to play basketball, and kind of had built up this kind of new momentum post surgery, post recovery, and just, yeah, I mean, that first kind of taste of adversity, and it had propelled me forward. And I remember that summer was like a really great summer of working out and Raiders Express. And then junior year of football, we're excited. We've got some good talent. We've got some good players, and then captain's voting comes around. I don't ever recall anticipating this happening, but I was voted a captain as a junior, which I was stoked and honored about, but it was just like a very cool moment for me to go from this kind of peak possibility of playing varsity football as a 10th grader, and then big phase of adversity, and then climbing out of there, and then have a nice kind of token moment of being voted the captain by my peers. So that was a fun season for me, fully understanding the full spectrum, the good and the bad, and all the things that come with it. So that was a really great learning moment for me. And I think about that like frequently now in my life. Yeah. Just understanding that, like, if you zoom out and try to look at problems from a little bit farther away, good things are coming, and it's not always the end all be all when something bad happens. So I really take that as a pretty strong kind of learning moment for me.
That's great stuff. One thing that really stuck out to me while you're talking there, you named a lot of names, and even though you only graduated 12 years ago from high school, a lot of those same names are still coaching at Hastings High School right now. So I know when I interviewed Jason Cook, Coach Cook, for the podcast here, one of the things that he talked about was, during his definition of success, is getting those alumni back into the program and coaching. So that would definitely be you, someone that he coached back in the day in two different sports, like you talked about, in football and in track and field, and now he's coaching alongside of you. So what's that like for you, where we could go on and on about names with Coach Strain and Coach Cook? I think Fritty was probably maybe there too. And
For sure.
Coach Fikema, and I think you're going to be coaching basketball this year. It's a rumor on the street. I don't want to break any news right now, but I heard you're going to be coaching that as well. And obviously
Possible.
Coach Cook, and just tons of names, Coach McGinnis, and I could keep on going down and down the line here. But what was it like for you as an athlete back in the day, as in high school, and now you're coaching alongside those same people that were coaching you?
Yeah, initially it was surreal. It was pretty cool. Like I for surely probably took a moment or two to just look over at Coach Strain for surely, and McGinnis, and a lot of those names that we just mentioned, just to say that at one point I was taking coaching from them. I feared them to a certain extent because I wanted to perform and do my job. And now to be somewhat considered equals, or somewhat considered on the same kind of plane, it was surreal for me at first. And now getting to talk both life and talking about family and relationship and all sorts of kind of fun stories and memories, and also getting to talk the game with them is even more enjoyable, because if we want to reference moments or plays from the last like 15 years till present, we're on the same page. And we can try to like converse about who was Hastings' best basketball player, or not best basketball player. Just, we don't do that, but just trying to talk about, if we are ever in conversation about that, or if we reference somebody like Doug Plum, or if we reference John Majeski or Scott Kelly, or just names that kind of come up in conversation, we're all on the same plane. So it's definitely humbling. There's always a little kind of sliver of magic. It's Pete McGinnis is like my 6th grade gym teacher and basketball coach. And now, like I mentioned, I get to coach his son. So so there's a little bit of magic in there, and a little bit of, for surely a little bit of position of opportunity, or just big opportunity to make sure that paying it forward, just giving the same experience of positive support and good challenges that Pete gave me to now his son. So it's really special, and super thankful that I get to be on the staff with those guys.
You just talked about it too. Positive support maybe is one of the qualities, but if you want to talk in big traits here, that's okay. And if you want to talk about specific people that had those traits, you can do that as well. But what kind of traits did you see with the coaches that we had in Hastings, that you were coached by, that you employ in your life and now use as a coach? So what would those qualities be that you saw and you really valued and now you use in your coaching?
I think that a lot of the coaches that are still currently coaching, that I was their player at one point, and we didn't define it as this, or maybe we didn't define it as this at the time, but this concept of whole person, recognizing and understanding that this is a young human being who's is on his journey as a young athlete and a young student athlete, but recognizing that there are circumstances and everyone has different needs and pinch points. All of them treated me as a whole person. I had different levels of interaction with all of them outside of football as well. Like, Coach Cook was like a young life leader at the time. So I not only interacted with him football and track and Raiders Express and school, but also young life as well. So getting to have those different layers to our relationship really kind of built trust between us. We were able to have some tough conversations, mainly about changing positions.
Mm-hmm.
And I trusted him, and for good reason too, because he provided the experience and kind of showed the signs that you're looking for a trustworthy person. And Coach Strain Coach Strain always gives at first this kind of tough exterior, or this kind of hard-nosed exterior. He calls himself Old Man Strain sometimes, but he really is somebody who values vulnerability, and somebody that knows that when you lean into that uncomfortable feeling, you're going to harvest something that's going to be really insightful, helpful, and probably going to touch somebody's lives in a pretty positive way. All of them found a way to get to that whole person. Coach Colvin has this great story from ninth grade, and it's not about me, but he's my best friend still, Matt Anderson. But he was the quarterback at the time, and quarterback, there are so many expectations and outside pressures associated with the position. All eyes are on quarterback. If you win, it's because of them. If you lose, it's because of them. Mm-hmm. Not saying that's right, but that's just the reality. And I remember he's told me the story a bunch of times, but at the time, the head coach was just a little bit more old school, and that's okay. I have a lot of love for that coach as well too. But Colvin always talks about following up with Matt and reassuring that it's okay, and that not one decision defines your performance or yourself as a person. And I know that stuck with Matt forever. Mm-hmm. And Colvin has the letter that Matt wrote to him, and that sticks out to me as just why we do it, as to why we coach. And for surely a testament to all those guys and their ability to reach the whole person, and not just view it as you are an athlete, you are strong, you're fast, tall, whatever it is, right? And I'm going to utilize that trait for this team's performance. It was never felt like that. Never felt as though we were being instructed or coached like that. And that's great. Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. So you're currently a social studies teacher at Hastings High School. You coach varsity football. And like I said, I already broke the news. You're going to be coaching basketball this year as well. When did you know, two-part question. I know I should only ask one question at a time, but two-part question for you here, Coach Schultz. When did you know you wanted to be a teacher and a coach? And this, especially too, why did you want to come back to Hastings?
I think I knew I wanted to be a teacher when I went, and if I can split those two up,
Let's do it.
Yeah, for me.
Three-part question, actually, then. All right, sorry.
Yeah, three-parted. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. This is a little bit of the human condition, right? The grass is always greener. I went into a job or a profession, and it was a little bit blind in the sense of I wasn't really sure as to how I was going to align my skills with the job. I worked in supply chain, or I worked in a business setting. And 2 years in, I pretty much had known that I don't think I can do this for much longer. Not because I was unhappy, but because I wasn't being utilized for who I am. So it was like this kind of very numb, flat line, I was just robotically going throughout the day and executing my tasks as in the role. But it's not as though I was utilizing the skills that are innately me. And and fortunately for me, the COVID situation in 2020 happened, and that kind of executed my exit strategy, and I found my way back into teaching. And it was much clearer, or it was clear to me that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
Once I was standing up back in front of the class, but really more just excited to get to know the students in my room and find out where I fit as a resource for them, or as just as somebody that is approachable and helpful, and hopefully it's their day for 15 minutes of their day. So I knew I wanted to be a teacher. Um, Again, that human condition, when I went into a job that wasn't teaching, and it was like, whoa, I don't think I can do this for another 30 years, or it'll be a wasted slate, or a wasted couple of talents. I don't want to say talents. It's more just inherently who I am. Yeah, for surely that. And as far as coaching, I think I've always loved like talking about the game and being around the game, whether it's basketball or football. In the earliest thing that I recall with coaching, I remember like refereeing youth basketball in middle school. And there were a lot of these kind of learning moments built into when I would call a travel or a double dribble. And instead of calling the penalty or violation and walking away, it was call the violation and the penalty, and then explain to the kiddo, like, hey, next time, jump stop, and then anchor your foot or plant your foot like a tree in the ground on that foot, right? And you teach them about the pivot foot or whatever it is. And it was just like, wow, that was really fun. I enjoyed like just talking about the game and helping them with that. And then I think that just stuck with me. Actually, I had a coaching minor, so I planned on coaching with teaching. And those classes, they weren't the most stimulating classes, but they reinforced my excitement about, it gave me a little bit of glimpse into the more administrative, legal side to coaching, which is for surely valid and important. But it just added more fuel to the fire. And I kept in touch with Coach Strain into college. There was a moment in time where I considered transferring to Eau Claire to try out for the football team, I guess right in my freshman year. But I did talk to a couple of college athletes that just explained the full scope of what that means to be a college or a collegiate athlete. And quite honestly, it was a pretty large, pretty big time commitment, and has nothing to do with love of the game or anything like that. It's more just, I have these 4-5 years or so of college to really hone in on what I want to do with my life and just be out on my own before I'm into the working world. And I think I just was like, I don't know if I'm willing to commit to that. So I wrestled with that for probably the first semester of my freshman year, but kept in touch with Coach Strain. And by the time my student teaching experience rolled around, I had my way into student teaching in Hastings with Mr. Hansen, who I had mentioned earlier.
Oh yeah.
And I've got to do a student teaching and a student coaching in one semester. So Coach Strain had allowed me to coach after I was done for the day with student teaching at the middle school. So I had a pretty rare and fortunate situation to get set up with. And that was it. That was all I needed. It's been 7 seasons now. And I guess one of them I was in Spain. So that one year I was teaching English, but it's been six and change seasons, and it's been sticking ever since.
All right. One thing that I really like hearing about is growth as well, and in coaching and in teaching as well. But let's just focus on coaching here. So is there anything that you wish, is there anything that you do now that you wish you did when you first started? So you look at it now and be like, man, if I would have done that right when I first started coaching, I would have been a way more effective coach. So is there anything in your life that would fit that bill?
I think when I responded to this, the first thing that came to mind was just patience, which I think the way you learn patience is just in time. But I think that I was so gung ho about trying to either like address something that was going on with a player that was my responsibility, and not like allowing them the agency and platform to try and cope with it themselves. It's probably a little bit trying to be hands off with the coaching, as far as just, like I said, a lot of time to work through a mistake that they made on the field, or an emotional outburst, or a mistake that they made in school, or an academic mistake or something, right before I try and go and guide them through or walk them through it. I wish that I would have been just a little bit more patient. I don't think anything negative ever happened from my kind of overexcitement. Just more now that I have a better understanding of the clientele or the students, the student athletes that I coach. It's more just, you have to allow them time to try and fix, address, work through whatever it is. And then they need my help, or if they need guidance or something, if they ask, then I can help them. It's more just that kind of patience and trust and allowing them to handle it. Hopefully that.
No, I love it. And then there's always a second part that I ask, something that you used to do as a new coach and that you don't do now. So this could be maybe a physical thing with the game, or it could be just like you talked about, maybe an emotional thing with your patients as well. So something that you used to do as a new coach that you thought you had to do, and you realized kind of along the way, you really didn't need to do that anymore. So what do you think that would be for you?
I have a couple of responses that came up right away. I was really insecure at first about, I didn't play this specific position that I coached, right? So it's not as though I have mastery level knowledge of the position that I coached. I was insecure about that. So I focused more on trying to achieve mastery in that position, or at that mastery, even just achieve like novice level knowledge. And now I understand that it's more about how you communicate technique and communicate expectations, and find different ways to communicate those techniques and expectations and values of the team. That is the more important part. The knowledge base is great, but if you don't have a bridge to travel across to get it to the player or the student athlete, really, really, really tough. So I was really insecure at first about actually knowing the answer to every question, which is, and now at this stage in my life or in my coaching journey, it's very much, I think, a understandable kind of insecurity, but at the same time, I wish I probably would have leaned more into just communicate and develop a relationship with them. And then you can work through your responses. Cause I think teachers do this as well, but you get 1 to 2 hypothetical steps ahead. And you're going to be viewed as, oh, this is not an expert, or, oh, this is just a guy out here yelling at me. And it's more about kind of what I had mentioned earlier with the whole person. If you can garner a good relationship and develop trust and know how this player communicates versus this player and what this player's pinch points are versus this player's pinch points, that is probably more of the things that you need to have to be successful as a coach than to know the answer to every question.
Yeah.
So I really struggled with that. And then I think the other one was like, I'm not like a hard-nosed dude, right? I'd mentioned Coach Strain earlier, right? And some coaches have that aura or have that look. I smile, I have dimples, I'm a goofy dude. I love that about me. So I think at first I didn't lean into that as much, not knowing, hey, student athletes are going to respond to your authentic self. So trying to be this kind of macho, hard-nosed dude when you're really like this guy that really loves football. The fact that I get to coach defense for this varsity squad is awesome. And I'm confident in my knowledge base of the position, but you can lean into your authentic self, be vulnerable and be comfortable and okay with who you are in front of those student athletes. Definitely struggled with that at first. And now I think after a few seasons and a few kind of sets of players that I've had for 2 or 3 years, you got to be yourself. You have to lean into your authentic self, and that authenticity will produce the most like essential you result.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how long did it take you to maybe get away from that, what you thought you had to do, to trying to be your authentic self? And was there any major event that happened, or was it just gradual along the line that it just floated away or kind of melted away?
I think if I were to say a major event, I think I'm a very kind of abstract thinker sometimes, or at least I'm an overthinker, a classic overthinker, but sometimes I have a decent insight, maybe once a 6-month period or something, but my time spent in Spain, again, the second time, I was much more on my own, so to speak. Um, so I was living in Madrid, and I was like a level, I think my evaluation at the time was like a level like 3 out of 9 Spanish speaker. And I had to go to a high school, and I was like the kind of English speaking resource for that high school. So it was for surely like a kind of a tough time, but like a great opportunity for me to be damn near on my own in another country that doesn't speak English. And I have a decent idea about some of the customs and traditions, and I can speak okay Spanish. But I was accepted by like the school I worked at. I was accepted by like my peers, by my fellow teachers. I had some really nice friends from around the United States and around the globe. And I didn't really try to put any sort of face on or anything. So, there's very well could be like interpreted as like a kind of an adverse situation. I was excited and looking forward to the opportunity, and I wanted to go back to Spain. But there was a lot of new, and there was a lot of uncharted territory. So finishing that and coming back after a year of doing that, and getting to go back out on the football field for surely instilled some confidence just in me, in myself. And I think it's another kind of one of those human condition things, is that sometimes you have to see yourself go that journey, or that journey, in order to really know and trust and believe that your authentic self is plenty, if not enough. So I very much came back after Spain, and that would have been 2018, fully just okay with being who I am, especially out on the football field, and knowing that I don't need to steer away. I don't need to put on this tough nose face, which, I mean, I'm sure in hindsight probably looked pretty humorous if you asked some kid to watch, or like maybe a former player of mine, to have them watch me be hard or try to be. So I would for sure give some of the credit to my time spent abroad, being in an uncomfortable but somewhat familiar situation. And 2018 we had a successful season that year too. So I don't know, I'm not going to ask them to coach you.
I think we can. I think that's the reason why.
It could be a part. Yeah,
I definitely think so.
Yeah. So it's great you have just a starting point to know that what you bring to the table is enough. And then now you can start to add layer different methods or techniques.
For sure. Earlier, I talked about Coach Cook, and he defined success. And one of the things he defined with success was getting his alumni back in and coaching with him, or coaching sports anywhere at any level as well. So, flipping the question on you now, Peter, how would you define success, especially when it comes to coaching, teaching, and in sports?
I really look at success as if I'm able to have a conversation, one-on-one conversation with all of the players that I get to interact with. And maybe that doesn't revolve around football or social studies. I'm able to connect with them on some level that we can meet at. That is a part of success for them, because it affirms who they are as their authentic self, whether we connect on music or travel or tacos, whatever it is. I think just if I'm able to create an environment where as many, if not all, players are affirmed and welcomed as who they are, that's successful in the classroom and on the field.
Awesome. You talked about earlier, Creighton was maybe the big rival when you were in high school. And I know you talked about only getting a couple wins your junior and your senior year. One of the big reasons was our conference. We were just playing in too big of a conference. The schools were huge. Once again, we had schools like Creighton and White Bear Lake and Stillwater in our conference. It was just game after game that were all tough. If you want to talk about it back in the day, if you want to throw in another school as well, back in the day as an opponent that you always looked forward to playing, or if you want to talk about now as a coach, that team that you always look forward to playing, once again, when it comes to football or maybe now basketball, go for it. So who's that opponent, maybe back in the day, if you want to expand on it, or now as a coach?
Sure. Yeah. Back in the day, and similarly now, we don't play them as much, but matching up with Cottage Grove Park was always a ton of. The stadiums are right off of Highway 61. Somebody calculated the actual mileage one year or whatever, and it called it like the 14-mile rivalry or something. But getting to match up with Cottage Grove was a ton of fun. Right. There were always like some family crossover and relatives live in Hastings or in Cottage Grove, but always enjoyed playing Cottage Grove. And confidently say that 2 of those 4 wins in my varsity football playing days were against Cottage Grove. That was always a fun matchup, and for sure competitive. As a coach, and actually I'll say for basketball, I really enjoyed playing Roseville. Roseville had some pretty good teams. Couple of players that went on to play, or for surely one that went on to play Division I basketball at Hofstra. But they always had some pretty good teams. And I remember that junior year that we went to the section championship, we went up to Roseville, beat them on their home court, it was a game-winning 3 actually from a good buddy of mine, Tony Hammis. Shout out Hammis. But that was always a really fun matchup because I'm pretty sure that they came to Hastings actually that same year and beat us on our court. So it was for surely a good contentious rivalry or at least good competitive basketball between them. So always loved playing Roseville. I'm sure Coach Spike could for surely a couple of those matchups, a couple of those players. But now I look forward always to playing St. Thomas. St. Thomas is, for a section opponent that is always on our radar for playoff seeding and section seeding. Obviously they've had a ton of success like over the last 5 to 6 years or so. And they're just the team that we are trying to get past right now. We will get past it. If you asked anybody on our staff, that's always the target that we're shooting for on any given year out there. And if you ever get a chance, get Will Van Duzer on this podcast, you'll have to ask him about his halftime speech. It was 2015. It was pretty epic. It was gladiator-esque. It was, we're talking Herb Brooks, talking Aragorn at the gates of Mordor.
Yeah,
we're
all wrapped into one here.
Yeah, so that's shout out Duzer for having an excellent halftime speech. This was actually the year before I started, so I unfortunately missed it. But if I were to have seen it or heard it, both, I probably would have tried to download that into my brain. And next time I'm on the bench, I'm thinking about that speech. Yeah, St. Thomas is always an opponent that I'm looking forward to. And St. Thomas week, right? The position that I coach have played a role in that week, and we really look forward to that competitive matchup. And we get them this year again. We usually get them every year, so we're excited to play them again. And yeah, we're going to get it. We will get a win one of these times.
What about a favorite moment so far as a high school coach? You said you got about 6 to 7 years so far coaching back here at Hastings High School. Is there anything that really sticks out in your mind as a favorite moment?
The 2018 section championship game was a ton of fun. We had a strong team with a lot of dudes, a lot of camaraderie. That senior class just had pretty good glue together. This would be like Alex O'Connor and Corbin LaFleur, like Johnny Cole's on that team. Probably, oh boy, can't think of the last name. Anyways, yeah, there were a lot of fun players. There was Ben Streeter, Noel Coleman, Danny Brown. We had a pretty successful season. I think we were either 9-1 or 10-1. Our one loss was to St. Thomas. It goes 21-7 down at Todd. And we matched up with them for the section championship game. And I had a quick little moment just before kickoff. The kick tee runs out and the kickoff return tee runs out. And the stands were packed for Hastings side and overflowing actually. And then St. Thomas's side was packed too. And for a second, I honest to God here, I couldn't hear anything because there was just that much kind of crowd noise and ruckus atmosphere. And it was a ton of fun. We did not play well enough to win, or we didn't win that day, but the game itself, I'll never forget, just because A, it was a battle. B, it felt like the community was all in on our football team, which is a ton of fun. Just given the maybe not recent history, so that kind of stretch of time where Hastings was going to the Dome, kind of playing for state championships. So it was a ton of fun, and the players lived up to the moment. And I know that is definitely tattooed into their memory and for surely into mine. So for surely the 2018 section championship game. And then there would be one other game that I remember. It's either going to be 2019 or 2020. I think it was 2019. We were playing North St. Paul, the Polar Bears, or no, not the Polars, up at North St. Paul. And it was just like a sideways snowing blizzard. It was, kind of one of those games where Minnesota's weather was happening, and we ended up winning like 72-7 or something. I think they were having issues that season with numbers, and it was a ton of fun just because the weather was just unbelievable. And the sideline was standing there taking it. The kids were having fun playing. And I definitely remember the first snow game we ever had. But yeah, so that for surely sticks out as well. Yeah. There's a ton of that. Even last year, I did not coach last year, but last year's matchup at South St. Paul, was for surely one for the ages, and one of the gutsiest calls by Coach Strain or Coach Cook. Whoever it was an overtime matchup, and they had scored and kicked their PAT. I don't remember exactly the score. I think it might have been 20-13. So we had scored a touchdown. So it was 2019, and then we ended up going for 2. We get the 2-point conversion and win the game. And it was just, again, a very ruckus atmosphere, and super cool to see the students crowd the field, or what am I trying to say? Storm the field on another person's, or on another city or another town's football field. I'm pretty sure it was their homecoming too. Heartbreaking loss for them, but pretty gutsy call for Coach Stern, and great memory for our football team.
Awesome stuff. Last couple questions then for you, Coach. We always like to end with advice for parents, coaches, and student athletes. So first group that we look at is parents and coaches, looking on all your years of experience as a high school athlete, years of experience as a high school coach and teacher. If you had to give parents and coaches a couple pieces of advice, what do you think would be?
I had to think about this one too. Just not quite a parent yet, but I definitely, I honestly would just like to say for surely that I understand. I think I can empathize a little bit with parents why they care so much. I think that, they care so much just in the sense of sometimes it gets to a point where it's a little bit maybe too involved, and that's a conversation for another day. But I just would like to probably say that, like, I acknowledge that parents care a lot about like their child's experience in sports, but I always just would like to encourage them to ask themselves, are you prioritizing fun for your child, right? Is fun like kind of one of the first kind of forefront things that their kids are talking, regardless of the scoreboard or the win-loss record for that year? Are they having fun? Are they making friends? Are they forming bonds with their teammates and with their coaches, with managers and staff? Because I think ultimately time is fleeting. It's not stopping. So trying to alter and manipulate the experience is probably not in the cards. So if I could just say one thing for parents, and hopefully I can do this when my kids, or if my kids choose to play sports or any activities, are you having fun? Are you maximizing your time for yourself? Because time is fleeting and we're always running out of it. I think the best thing to prioritize is having fun and forming meaningful relationships with the people around you. So that would be not great advice. I don't give good advice. Be my best. That'll be my best piece of advice.
That's perfect. Last group then is student athletes. So these are the young kids that you're teaching all day long in school, maybe even a little younger than that. Those kids are looking to get to that varsity level eventually one day, and they're coming to the home football game here in a couple of weeks. So if you had to give those kids a couple pieces of advice, what would it be?
And for the kids, I had pretty simplified. I said, make it count, make your experience count, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, because mistakes are ultimately what's going to kind of propel you forward on your growth journey. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, is make it count, because all we have is this present moment. It is fleeting. Time is eating always. So make it count, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, because those mistakes will ultimately be your kind of learning tools to move forward and grow. So make it count.
Awesome. Last thing we always do is just turn the microphone over to our guests. So anything that I forgot to ask you, any shout outs you want to give, anything else you want to get off your chest? Like I said, this time is yours, and you could go for it, Coach.
Hey, I wasn't sure what to say. Just pre-snap planning for this, but Tim, thank you for putting this all together. giving a little insight on what a lot of our coaches' conversations are about. In either the all coaches meetings, or I'm sure the head coaches meetings, the inside out coaching book seminars that we do. Thank you for putting this on blast and giving a little glimpse into what our conversations are like. Because truly, this is what it sounds like in the coach's office is, how can we make this a better experience for the 50, 60 kids that we have? Just want to give a good amount of praise to you for putting this together, for surely allowing me to come talk and drone on about some stories I have and some memories. But definitely want to thank you for providing the platform and giving a little bit of time and space to let everyone know what we're doing, because this is what we're doing. We all we want is to provide a fun and meaningful experience for the student athletes in Hastings.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach. I appreciate it.
You're the man.